In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to glaze your pottery once it has been bisque fired and comes out of the kiln. So as you can see, I've kind of got my setup here going with my pinch pot. So this is the one that I'm going to glaze, and I've got a few different brushes for different parts that I'm going to glaze. One thing I do want to recommend is that you check your brush ahead of time to make sure that there's no glaze or paint left in the bristles. Unfortunately, some people suck and don't wash theirs out good, and you don't want it to contaminate your color on your pot. So make sure that it's clean before you get started. Alright. Also, you're going to make sure that your surface is covered with newspaper, not a slab mat, newspaper, because newspaper is free and easy to come by, and once you're done, you can just throw it away. But this will protect the table from getting glaze on it. Alright, I've got my pot. So I'm going to rinse this off first and then let it dry. Shouldn't take too long. And that way any residual dust from the kiln or any other kind of like oils from hands, anything like that can be washed off ahead of time, because that will affect the glaze adhering to the piece. Anyway, so I'm going to wash this off and go pick up my glazes. And you can see here that this has got a textured surface. Let me go a little closer. The bird does as well. So I'm going to try to pick out some glazes that highlight the texture. Anyway, I will show you which one of those I think is going to work the best. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is come consult these glaze charts in the corner of the classroom. We don't have all the glazes on these charts, but we do have quite a few of them. And we may even have some that are discontinued, so they're not on here, in which case we can just Google them and usually find out what they look like. We're also going to eventually have tiles up here for all the glazes, but we're in the process of reconfiguring those. But you can see what the glaze tiles usually look like. That way you can get kind of a real life view of what it will look like once the glaze has been fired. All right, so I think for the body of my pot, I'm going to use an element glaze. Those are kind of your earthier colors, and they tend to look really nice over textured surfaces. Other glazes do too, but to me, this really looks nice on the texture. So first of all, I want something that's going to highlight that lace texture that is on the bottom. So I'm going to look and see what up here I think would look nice. Maybe something kind of green. I really like patina. That might be a good one. Or lapis lagoon. That one's good too. Now the thing is, we don't always have all of them up here, so it's good to have a couple ideas before you go to find them, just in case we're out of the one that you want. Okay, so I'm thinking maybe lapis lagoon, but if I don't have that, then maybe patina. Those are both different shades of like green or aqua. All right, now for the bird, probably gonna do a bluebird. And he's got texture too that I want to show off, so I think what I'll probably use for that is this one called Mirror Blue. But if I don't have Mirror Blue, I might go with Blue Grotto. And then the belly, I want to do a little bit of an orangish glaze, so there's several options I can pick from here. You've also got these up here. I just don't particularly think those will look good on my bird, but again, it's your choice. Then I've got some solid colors over here called Stroke and Coat glazes. And then I've also got foundations. So like I said, if there's not a chart up here, you can Google the color if you see a jar that has a name that's not up here. But we have a catalog too that I'll set out by these. All right, so back to where I was. So there are a lot of different shades that could kind of work for the orangey part of the bird. I really like this cactus flower, but then if I don't find that, maybe the rose granite or ginger root. But at least I've got some ideas now, so I'm gonna go look and see what I can find. All right. So this closet over here is where all the glazes are kept, and this is a work in progress, so it's kind of a hot mess, but the glazes that you guys can use are going to be on the right side of the room. Let me turn on the light. Okay. So you can see all the glazes on the shelves, and they are labeled by what type they are. So jungle gems and crystallites, these are the kinds with the speckles, and you can see the label has jungle gems on it. It's got the color name, and then I also write them on top. but that's not the kind I want. So I was going to use elements. So elements are down here. We've got some acrylic paint next to those. You don't want to use the acrylic paint. That cannot go in the kiln. That will be relocated eventually, but we're going to look for the elements. All right, so first off, I'm going to rinse off my piece just briefly. Make sure any dust is removed. And that's pretty much it. And it will dry really quick. So just set it aside and then go pick out your glaze. Okay, now I'm ready to glaze my piece. I have washed it off and it's dry. Got my paintbrushes, my glazes picked out. So the first thing I'm going to do is the biggest part of my pot, which is all going to be the same color. So for that, I'm going to do Lapis Lagoon, which is one of the element glazes. And it's sort of an aqua color, but it shows off texture really well. Okay, so I'm going to open the glaze. And I'm not going to put this in a palette. I'm just going to dip straight into this with a paintbrush. It's going to be easier to do it that way. That way you don't have to worry about scraping extra glaze back into the jar if you get too much. This stuff is super expensive and we go through a lot of it, so we have to conserve the glaze every time we can. Sometimes the lid's on a little tight. If it hasn't been used in a while, you may need to run it under hot water to loosen it up. And this is a no-no. If you drip glaze around the lid, make sure you go back and wipe it off before you put the lid on. That'll make it easier for the next person. Same with this. This makes it to where the jar doesn't always close as well. And if it's picked up and not closed, sometimes the lid pops off and it falls and spills all over the place, and that's never good. Alright, so for the first part, I'm going to use this big fan brush. The way this brush is structured, I guess you could say, in this fan shape, it works well to cover a lot of ground when I'm glazing. So since I'm doing a large area, this is going to work well. So I'm going to use this for the first part. Alright. And I'm just going to stir it around a little. It's kind of the consistency, maybe like yogurt. And you need 3 coats. So I'll start on the inside. Now I could put this on a banding wheel and turn it as I go, but this is small, so I'm just going to hold it. So I'm kind of going horizontally best I can on the inside of this. And I got a little bit on my bird where I didn't want it, so I can go back and wipe that off with a wet sponge. Kind of hard to do horizontal coat on a convex surface like this, so just do the best you can. I don't know if you guys can see, but there are definitely some thin spots, and this is why 1 coat of glaze is not enough, so we're definitely going to give it more than 1 coat. Okay, while this is drying, I'm going to go ahead and do the outside. I guess this one's going to be vertical. Okay, nah, I'll switch back. See what I mean? The fan brush allows you to cover a lot of area quickly. Now you'll notice I'm trying to avoid getting it on the bottom if I can. If glaze gets on the bottom of your pot and the pot is sitting on the kiln shelf when the glaze is fired onto it, basically this glaze is going to liquefy and turn into glass when it cools, and your pot will be stuck to the kiln shelf, and that's not good. Because at that point we're going to have to chisel it off the shelf. And not only will it probably break your piece, but it's also going to damage the expensive kiln shelf, and if you break it, you buy it. So be really careful to keep the glaze off the bottom. Sometimes you get a little creeping over the edge. You just go back with a wet sponge when you're finished glazing and get that. Let me move this over. Okay, so the inside coat's starting to dry a little bit. I could have done all of them at once, but I'm impatient. This may make it a little harder to handle, but like I said, I'm impatient, so I'm just going to finish this coat on the outside. Got a little bit on my fingers, not a big deal, just wash them when you get done. You don't want to leave it on there indefinitely just in case you happen to have like a reaction to the chemicals. Okay, so you can see it is creeping over the edge a little bit. I'm going to go back and clean that off later. Alright, so I'm going to let that dry and I'm going to go back to the inside. Got a little on my fingers, so wipe it on my newspaper. Okay, now I'm going to try to go vertically with this one. So basically what I'm doing with this glaze is called cross-hatching. If you've ever taken a 2D art class or drawing class, I'm sure you have heard that before because it's also a shading technique. So basically, I did the first coat horizontal, this one's vertical, and this just ensures that I make sure that all the surfaces get covered. Put a little too much so it's sort of dripping down, and I'm just kind of catching that extra. I also need to go over the edge, so I'm going to go ahead and do that with the excess. And then I'm going to let this dry. The outside's still kind of wet, so I'm going to let it dry too before I do any more coats. Okay, I finished glazing most of the pot except for the bird, so I'm going to move on to that now. You'll notice that this is starting to dry. There's still some wet spots. I did kind of wipe off the bottom, although I need to go back and clean it up a little bit more when I'm done. I also cleaned up around the bird where some of the glaze went where it wasn't supposed to. If it's hard to get in tight spots to clean like that, I find that a brush with stiff bristles, wet just a little on the ends, can kind of get in there and scrub it off. So that's what I would suggest using. Another thing I wanted to point out is you'll notice that even though the glaze I used is supposed to be kind of an aqua green color, it looks gray right now. So here's the thing. Once that glaze hits those high temperatures, it's going to undergo a chemical reaction and change colors. So it will change to the color it's supposed to, but right now it just looks chalky and gray. So don't get too worked up if the glaze isn't what you expect. Always consult the color chart though, because sometimes you get a glaze that looks one color and then, when it's fired it comes out totally different. So always go by the label and the color chart. Alright, now that I'm done with that spiel, let's go on to the next part. So I'm going to use the mirror blue to glaze the bird. This is an element glaze, which also I think picks up the texture really well. And again, blue, but you'll notice it looks like pink or lavender in the bottle. It'll be different once it's fired. This is an older bottle, so it's got some crusty stuff at the top. Just going to knock that back down in there and stir it a little bit. And I'm going to use a smaller brush for this so I can get into those small, tight areas. Stir it up just a little bit. Don't ever shake your bottle because bad things happen. Unfortunately, this one has some buildup around the top, so once again, the lid may not be on good if that's the case. And if you shake a bottle, the lid's not on good, it could explode and make a giant mess everywhere and also waste the expensive glaze. Alright, so now I'm going to glaze the bird, and again, I'm just going to try to give it 3 coats. Dipping right into the jar. And you can see right through this right now, so it definitely needs more than just 1 coat of glaze. You'll notice I switched to that smaller brush. I might even go with a little bit smaller one to get in some of those tight spots. I usually have some small brushes on my desk that you're welcome to use as long as you clean them good and put them back when you're finished. Don't mix them in with the general population of paintbrushes. And I'm trying to go around the eye. I'm going to go in and put some black glaze where the eye is. So I'm trying really hard not to get any glaze in there, but I may have to go clean it out before I do that part. Same with the beak. I'm going to do that a different color, so I'm trying to go around it as much as I can. Okay. Now to the other side of the bird. And since this can be kind of tedious, I'm gonna not record the next part. I'll show you what to do when I get done with this. All right, while the blue is drying, I just want to show you a couple things about the glaze. So pretty much the glaze we use in here is non-toxic, but if you're ever unsure, you can look right here on the label. See this AP right here? This means that your glaze is non-toxic, so always look for that if you're not sure. I can't speak for other places that you might use glaze outside of the school, but if you see this symbol right here on the label, then it's non-toxic. If it has any issues as far as dinnerware goes, meaning anything that you might eat off of, it will say on the label as well, may not be suitable for dinnerware due to surface characteristics. Certain elements can be kind of chunky and may cause problems, but I think this is going to be fine for what I'm doing, and I'm using mine like a flower pot anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. You guys don't have to worry about this, but see, it'll tell you right here on the directions, apply 3 coats to shelf cone 04 bisque, so that means it's been fired to cone 04, not 4, 04, big difference there. Using a soft brush, okay, and then afterwards I'm going to fire it to cone 06. So this is a little bit different. The higher the numbers get with the 0 in front of them, the lower the temperature is. It's kind of like negatives and positives, I guess you could say. But it'll say right here on the glaze what the temperature is. Okay, 06 or 05. So approximately 999 degrees Celsius, 1046 degrees Celsius. Don't ask me the Fahrenheit conversion, I don't remember. But that definitely tells you that this is going to a super high temperature. Okay, one thing with these element glazes in particular is that they do tend to run a little bit more, which is called fluxing in the world of pottery. So you really want to be careful not to, put too much, because it may drip over the bottom anyway, even if it's cleaned off, and fuse your piece to the shelf. So just be careful. Only apply the number of coats that it is called for. Oh, another thing too, it also says non-toxic, lead-free here. So besides this symbol, you can also see here that it's non-toxic. Alright, now we're going to finish up the rest of the bluebird. So the next glaze I'm going to use is rose granite. So when I open this, you'll notice that it looks black. But this is going to turn out kind of an orangey, earthy orange color. So again, always consult the label. I mean, the lid should be correct, but sometimes people get them mixed up, so consult the label and the glaze chart. Okay, and I really am not going to need a whole lot of this for the little bit I'm going to do. So bluebirds usually have kind of a orangey belly. Oh, this is really thick. So I'm just going to put a little here in the spot that I left. And it looks really funny right now, but I promise you this is going to turn out like an earthy orange color. And I'm trying not to let this overlap too much, because I don't know how those glazes are going to react together. So do your best not to overlap them if you can, especially if the colors are completely different. I may need to add a little bit of water to this glaze. If you find that you choose a glaze that ends up being dried out, let me know about it so I can add a little water to it and mix it up for you, or tell you what to do. Don't ever try to add the water on your own, because you may put too much and then it won't be usable. Okay, so there's that. Now since this is a little drier and super thick consistency, I'm not like putting 3 coats, I'm just kind of blobbing it on. So that's going to be orangey, the bluebird. Okay, set that brush aside for now. And now I got to do the eyes and the beak. Okay. So this is one of the stroke and coat glazes, and you'll notice these are in a long tall bottle. This kind you actually have to put in a paint palette most of the time because the bottle is too narrow at the top to dip the brush into. Now another thing you can do is, well, let's see. I'm just going to open it, and if it's not dried up around the opening, I can just squirt a little bit out of my newspaper because I really don't need much. Go kind of slow, so hopefully I don't get too much. Okay, like literally a dot. That's all I need because I'm just applying this to the beak. Okay, and I'm going to take a small brush, blob on there. And you can see I'm putting this on kind of thick, so I'm probably not going to do 3 coats. Such a small space. And again, try your best not to overlap the colors because this isn't like acrylic paint. Let's say I get some yellow over the blue and I'm like, oh, I'll just paint over it. Well, guess what? The yellow and blue are going to mix together in the kiln when they liquefy, and you don't know what you're going to come out with. Oh, there's a little dot of black on there. It'll be a surprise and probably not a pleasant one. You can't just paint over it. You have to scrape it off or wipe it off with a sponge. Okay, so I've got the beak, and the last thing I'm going to do is apply just a little bit of this black ice to where the eyeballs are. Okay, so another element glaze. This one's black, but it's like a shiny black, hence the name black ice. So almost like iridescent. And I've got a really tiny brush because these are just teeny tiny spots, and I really don't want it to get in the other places where it's not supposed to be. Okay, I'm going to flip over and do the other one. Oops. Might have to clean that up when I get done. Okay. So I'm pretty much done glazing. Now I'm going to go clean the bottom off again, and that way I can make sure that there's none that will stick to the kiln shelf. See, even that little bit, you want to wipe all this off. Anywhere it's flat where it's going to sit needs to be wiped off with a wet sponge. If you do not clean the bottom of your pot, it will not be fired. Keep that in mind. Now, once this comes out of the kiln, we'll take a look at it. And the good thing is, if it has any thin spots, I can go and glaze over those again. It's a little more difficult to do because the surface quality is going to be different, but it can be done. So I would always recommend doing a touch-up glaze if you need to, so that way you get the highest grade possible on your glazing. Let me give you a little example. This was a piece that was made last year, and the glaze looks pretty good, but you can see how it's kind of streaky here in the green. Same with the red on the strawberries, a little streaky, so it just wasn't applied thickly enough. And some of these glazes, they're a little watery than others, so maybe they need extra coats. Kind of hard to tell. If that's the case, if it comes out like this will have points off on the glaze grade, so I would definitely recommend reglazing this. Since this is a little satiny, it's going to be hard to get the glaze to stick, so you may have to heat it with the heat gun just a little bit and then glaze over that part. Go to the next one, heat it a little bit, glaze over that part, and so on. That's the best way to do it because once this is hot, the glaze will dry on it really fast instead of beating up and coming off. So that's a tip for reglazing if you need to reglaze, but always reglaze if you need it, because that will improve your grade. And if you're not sure, just ask and I can help you. Alright, my piece is done being glazed. I've gone back and wiped the bottom again. Everything looks like it's where I want it to be, so I'm going to go put it on the appropriate shelf in the room with the kilns, the one that has a sign that says Glaze on the side, and I'm going to leave it there to be fired, and we will see what it looks like when it comes out of the kiln.